Why did Diana's beloved nieces turn their backs on her son? Why did they choose the heir over the spare, and do it so publicly? And why did Prince Harry's reaction, behind closed doors in Montecito, shake even his closest aides? It was supposed to be a glamorous, polished evening. The 2025 Royal Variety Performance, one of the most celebrated and time-honored events in the royal calendar. The cameras were rolling. The crowds were cheering. Flashbulbs were popping in the crisp London air. The future king, Prince William, stepped onto the red carpet, poised and regal as ever. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But it was who walked beside him that triggered a silent explosion, one that would travel 5,000 miles to California and strike at the very core of Prince Harry's fractured identity. Lady Kitty Spencer, Lady Eliza Spencer, Lady Amelia Spencer. 3 names. 3 figures of grace, elegance, and legacy. And until recently, 3 of the last remaining bridges Harry believed still connected him to his late mother's bloodline. Now, that bridge was burning. They didn't just attend. They stood with William, side by side, glowing, smiling, framed by a sea of royal photographers. Not a single glance toward the camera screamed rebellion, yet the message was deafening. And Prince Harry was watching. Imagine seeing your own family, your mother's family. Show the world whose side they've chosen. This wasn't just optics. It was a statement. But here's where it gets even messier. Just weeks earlier, Harry had reached out to the Spencer sisters. Quietly, personally. A private message, described by insiders as emotional and raw. He was seeking support, maybe even reconciliation. After all, if anyone could understand the burden of Diana's legacy, surely it would be them. Instead, silence. Then the red carpet. What happened between those messages and this moment? Why did these women, who grew up orbiting both brothers, now align themselves so visibly with the institution Harry has spent years battling? The answer isn't simple. It involves buried family resentments, unspoken aristocratic codes, and a mounting frustration among the Spencers that's been quietly simmering since the Oprah interview. You thought this was about royal drama? This is about personal betrayal. And here's the twist no one saw coming. Behind the scenes, this wasn't a one-night snub. This had been brewing for months, some say years. The private gatherings at Althorpe, the family dinners where Meghan's name was never spoken aloud but always hovered in the air. The emails, the cold replies, the passive-aggressive RSVPs to charity events. The Spencers, it seems, had been distancing themselves long before the cameras caught up. But why now? Why choose this specific night, with the entire British press watching, to step into the public eye, not just as guests, but as William's allies? Could it be that this red carpet wasn't just about music and performance? Could it have been a chess move? Let's step back. For years, the Spencer sisters walked a diplomatic tightrope. They appeared at weddings, christenings, family events, always graceful, never controversial. They dodged the press, spoke kindly of both brothers, and wore their connection to Diana as an elegant but silent tribute. But in 2025, something shifted. Some insiders claim it was Lady Kitty's frustration over being dragged into Harry's public scandals, especially after the release of Spare, which allegedly revived painful memories for the entire Spencer family. Others say Eliza and Amelia were growing closer to Kate Middleton behind the scenes, bonding over shared causes and charity appearances, and finding in her a kind of quiet, dignified strength they felt was missing elsewhere. And then there's the Meghan factor. Let's be real. Aristocratic circles in Britain haven't always embraced Meghan. There's been a visible tension, not overt, not always cruel, but undeniably cold. And the Spencers? They belong to that world. The world of discretion, of unspoken rules, of quiet status and whispered loyalty. So when Meghan entered the royal scene, all eyes were on how Diana's nieces would respond. Would they embrace her? Speak out? Defend her when the press turned brutal? They didn't. Not once. Not publicly. And that silence now speaks volumes. Because if they had reservations then, those doubts have only grown louder, especially as the Sussexes doubled down on their criticisms of the monarchy, dropped explosive claims, and launched multiple media projects centered around personal grievance. The Spencers, by contrast, have chosen elegance, distance, quiet alignment. And on that red carpet in 2025, they made their position undeniably clear. But let's not pretend this didn't come at a cost. Back in California, sources say Harry was devastated. He reportedly slammed his laptop shut when he saw the photos online. One aide described his expression as not anger, more like stunned heartbreak, for a man who's already lost so many family connections. From his father's trust to his brother's companionship, seeing his mother's family publicly embrace the other side felt like the final blow. And here's the part that really burns. Harry always believed the Spencers understood him, understood why he walked away, understood the trauma he carried from losing his mother so young, and growing up in an institution that seemed more concerned with appearances than healing. But now it felt like they'd chosen the institution. It wasn't just a matter of siding with William. It was choosing the crown over kin, choosing protocol over pain, choosing to be seen, literally, on the side of the firm. And Harry, once again, was left alone. But there's more to this than just hurt feelings. According to well-placed insiders, this very public display has triggered a new crisis behind palace walls. Questions are now swirling about succession optics, internal alliances, and how the Spencer appearance might shift public sympathy in unexpected ways. Because here's the contradiction. While the Spencers believe they are honoring Diana's legacy by standing with William, many supporters of Harry and Meghan see this moment as a betrayal of everything Diana stood for: rebellion, compassion, and pushing back against royal rigidity. So whose version of Diana is right? Is it William's, the stoic, dutiful heir with a well-oiled image? Or is it Harry's, the raw, wounded son who tore the curtain back? The Spencer sisters now find themselves caught between these narratives. And with one carefully choreographed appearance, they've declared which version of Diana they believe in. But here's the final twist. Some say this public appearance was actually strategic damage control. That behind the scenes, there had been tensions building between William and the Spencer sisters. And this red carpet moment was a way to mend fences, remind the public of family unity, and distract from deeper scandals looming in the background. And Harry? Well, he's not done. Not by a long shot. What we're hearing from Montecito is that Harry is preparing a private letter, one last attempt to reach the Spencers directly, bypassing press, bypassing protocol. An appeal to emotion, to shared history, to Diana's memory. But whether that letter will be received, or even read, remains uncertain. Because while cameras captured smiling faces and sparkling gowns, they missed what really matters. The silence, the cold shoulders, the stories that didn't make the headlines. And what comes next might just be the biggest rupture yet. Because the truth behind that red carpet is darker than anyone imagined. And in the shadows of Kensington Palace, something else was brewing. Something that would pull Lady Kitty even deeper into the center of a royal rift. What does it mean to carry Diana's blood, but walk in the opposite direction of her son? Is legacy about DNA or choices? Lady Kitty Spencer always carried the public's fascination like an accessory. Elegant, mysterious, statuesque, she was the niece who looked so much like Diana that people would gasp when she entered the room. The same sculpted cheekbones, the same big eyes, the same poised tilt of the head. But she was never just a lookalike. Behind the glamorous editorials, Italian villas, and runway appearances, Kitty Spencer always knew her role wasn't just socialite. It was symbolic. The niece of the people's princess. The woman the world still mourned. The family name that still carried 1,000 whispered expectations. So when she chose to appear beside Prince William, and only William, at the 2025 Royal Variety performance, the world took notice. But this wasn't a sudden decision. This wasn't about one evening or one photo op. This was the culmination of years of quiet choices, awkward dinners, and subtle exits from group chats that once included Harry and Meghan. And to understand why the Spencer sisters ended up standing beside the future king, and not Diana's younger son, we have to rewind. Because Diana's legacy didn't fracture overnight. It splintered slowly, quietly, and painfully. Back in the late 2000s and early 2010s, before Meghan Markle, before Frogmore, before Spare, there was a sense of unity among the next generation. At royal weddings and family memorials, you'd often see Lady Kitty with her cousins, both William and Harry, smiling, laughing, playfully posing for the cameras. Behind the scenes, Harry was reportedly particularly close to the Spencer side. He spent time at Althorpe, Diana's childhood home. He stayed in touch with his aunts and cousins long after his mother's death. He was the sensitive one, they said. The one who reminded them most of Diana's emotional vulnerability, the spark and the softness. William, by contrast, had always leaned into the Windsor role, duty, decorum, and distance. The future king, the institution's heir. But even then, the Spencers noticed the difference. They noticed how William managed the press, how he handled the family image, how he made peace with the protocols that Diana once loathed. And slowly, they began to realize something troubling. Maybe Diana's legacy wasn't just about rebellion. Maybe it was also about protection, about preserving dignity, about knowing when to push back and when to play the game. This realization became more urgent after Harry married Meghan. At first, there was excitement, even admiration. Meghan was fresh. She was poised. American, yes, but polished. The Spencer sisters reportedly sent well wishes and even considered visiting Frogmore Cottage in the early days. But then came the tabloids. Then came the battles. Then came the Oprah interview. The rift within the Windsors was suddenly global news. And while Harry and Meghan gained fans in Hollywood and among anti-monarchy groups worldwide, they lost something else. They lost the quiet backing of their own extended family. Because to the Spencers, who had survived decades of royal drama, death, and institutional manipulation, there was something dangerous in making private pain public. They saw echoes of Diana's suffering, but also echoes of her regrets. According to one source close to the family, Lady Eliza once confided to a friend, Diana didn't want to blow up the monarchy. She wanted to feel loved by it. And that's the contradiction that now haunts Harry's warpath. Because while he claims to carry his mother's torch, some in the Spencer clan believe he's misunderstood what she truly wanted. Diana wasn't seeking destruction. She was seeking change. Not chaos. Not revenge. Lady Kitty, especially, has embraced this nuanced approach. She's built her life not in opposition to royalty, but in parallel. She's graced the covers of Tatler and Vogue, attended palace events, and cultivated friendships within the aristocracy and fashion elite, without ever stepping too far into controversy. She knows the rules. She knows how to bend them, but not break them. She learned from Diana's pain. So when Meghan and Harry began airing royal grievances through documentaries, books, and explosive sit-downs, Kitty reportedly grew increasingly uncomfortable. She didn't say it out loud. She didn't tweet. She didn't release a statement. But she stopped replying to texts. She stopped RSVPing to California events. And eventually, she stopped defending Harry in family circles. Was it loyalty to the crown? Or was it exhaustion? Perhaps both. There's a moment, rarely spoken about publicly, that many believe marked the true turning point in the Spencer-Windsor relationship. It was the 2022 memorial for Diana, held privately among family and close friends at Althorpe. It was supposed to be intimate, respectful, a moment of quiet reflection. But when Harry and Meghan's team reportedly tried to coordinate a camera crew to document the day, allegedly for their Netflix deal, the Spencer sisters were livid. According to a family source, Lady Amelia reportedly told a confidant, "That's not what Mummy would have wanted. This is sacred." The request was denied. The Sussexes didn't attend. And from that moment on, things were never quite the same. Fast forward to 2025. Lady Kitty's public life has flourished. She married into Italian nobility. She became a fixture at Cannes, Milan Fashion Week, and London's charity galas. She was dubbed Diana's modern mirror by the press, poised, glamorous, and universally adored. And then came the call from Kensington Palace. An invitation, not just to attend the royal variety performance, but to walk with William, side by side, publicly. Some say she hesitated. Others say she agreed immediately. Either way, her presence, alongside Eliza and Amelia, was a royal earthquake in heels. Because it wasn't just about family. It was about alignment. In that single, orchestrated moment, the Spencer sisters made their position crystal clear. They weren't backing Harry's crusade. They weren't endorsing the Sussex brand. They were standing with William, with the monarchy, with the image of stability, and perhaps with the version of Diana who smiled for the cameras, even when her heart was breaking. But that's the haunting question, isn't it? Which version of Diana lives on in her nieces? The firebrand rebel who leaked tapes and shattered protocol? or the elegant icon who knew how to weaponize charm and when to stay silent? Maybe it's both. Maybe the Spencer sisters are walking a tightrope Diana herself never quite mastered, balancing the urge to speak out with the wisdom to hold back. But where does that leave Harry? Alone, watching, reeling, and wondering, have I become the outsider in my own family's story? Because that night, the world saw more than a photo op. It saw a new alliance, a new royal axis. William, Kate, the Spencer sisters, the crown, and the bloodline. And Harry? He was nowhere to be found. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started with a toast. A quiet dinner. No cameras. No press. Just the Spencers, gathered behind the tall iron gates of Althorpe House, the ancestral home where Diana's memory still lingers like perfume in the corridors. It was late spring 2024, a private family weekend, the kind they rarely advertised but often needed. Lady Jane, Lady Sarah, Charles Spencer, and the next generation, Kitty, Eliza, Amelia, Lewis. No titles, no staff gossip, just blood. And yet, there was a tension in the air. Everyone felt it. No one said it, until someone raised their glass and broke the silence. To healing, they said, whatever that looks like. And that was it, the floodgate. What followed was a conversation that would tilt the balance of loyalty within the Spencer family forever. A conversation that would, eventually, reach Harry. But not in the way they'd hoped. Because here's what really happened at Althorpe, the night Diana's nieces chose to stop biting their tongues. According to sources close to two guests at the dinner, what started as a light family discussion veered sharply into darker waters when Meghan's name came up. It was Lady Sarah, Diana's eldest sister, who allegedly expressed concern first. Quietly, respectfully. She wasn't attacking Harry. She was worrying. I fear he's lost himself, she said. Not out of cruelty, not out of anger, but out of real, bone-deep sorrow. She spoke of the boy who once ran across the Althorpe lawns barefoot. The boy who left daisy chains on Diana's grave. The boy who used to cry when he couldn't sleep unless his brother was in the same room. And now that boy was a man with a global media deal and a decade-long grudge. The family sat in silence. Until Lady Kitty, ever the diplomat, reportedly asked, when did we last hear from him? Personally. That's when it hit them. Months had passed. Not a birthday call. Not a holiday message. Not even a reply to a handwritten note Charles Spencer had reportedly sent after the Queen's funeral. That's when Lady Eliza, usually the quiet one, finally spoke up. And what she said, according to two independent sources, left everyone stunned. It's not just Harry. It's Meghan. It's both of them. They only reach out when there's a camera nearby. A gasp, a pause, and then an avalanche. Everyone had something to say. The Oprah interview, the Spotify shade, the spare confessions. The fact that their family had been dragged into the narrative without their consent. That Diana's memory was now a soundbite, used to justify palace takedowns and late-night therapy revelations. But here's the twist. They weren't angry that Harry was speaking his truth. They were angry that he was profiting from their pain. Because it wasn't just his trauma. It was theirs too. And unlike him, they had chosen silence. Dignity. Privacy. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. At some point during the evening, the conversation turned to a specific moment that still haunted the family. The final pages of Spare. According to multiple family members, Harry had described Althorpe with what they felt was emotional detachment, as if it were a museum, not a home. A place to bury grief, not to feel it. That line, I don't belong there anymore. It gutted them. Because for the Spencers, Althorpe is sacred. It is where Diana rests. It is where she was mourned. Not just by the public, but by the people who knew her laugh, her temper, her scent, her pain. And to hear Harry describe it like a ghost town, it felt like erasure. Lady Amelia reportedly stood up at one point during the dinner. She held her wine glass by the stem and said something no one had dared say out loud. I'm tired of pretending. According to a cousin who was present, she looked around the table and added, we've tiptoed around his choices for 5 years. We've smiled for the cameras. But let's not lie to ourselves. He doesn't want to be part of this family anymore. He wants to control the narrative. And that's not love. That's manipulation. Silence again. Then nods. And in that moment, a decision was made. Not formal, not dramatic, but deeply emotional. The Spencer sisters were done apologizing for Harry. They were done explaining him away. They were done sacrificing their own peace to defend choices they never agreed with in the first place. But here's the irony. No one planned to go public. This wasn't a palace strategy. It wasn't a PR move. It was just a family finally being honest with each other. In the home that raised them. In the house where Diana once chased toddlers through the hallways and whispered lullabies before bedtime. But truth has a way of leaking. And what happened next would shift everything. Because one guest at that Althorpe dinner, a cousin, not one of the sisters, left with more than just food for thought. They left with an opinion. And they emailed it to a friend, who forwarded it to someone in Montecito. And before anyone could say privacy, Meghan had read it. The email reportedly included quotes, paraphrased but recognizable, from Eliza and Amelia. Lines about tired of the drama, constant media spectacles, and weaponizing Diana. No slurs. No scandalous insults. Just honesty. But to Harry, it felt like betrayal. Because these weren't distant royals. These weren't Windsors with cold shoulders and stiff upper lips. These were his mother's blood. His childhood playmates. His last remaining link to her. And they'd spoken about him like he was a stranger. Or worse, a threat. According to palace insiders, the moment Harry read that email, something shifted. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He went still. One aide, who asked not to be named, described it as the quietest rage I've ever seen. He reportedly closed his laptop, stood up, and walked outside. For hours. When he came back, he told Meghan, they've made their choice. And then nothing. No response. No message. No follow-up. Until, weeks later, the royal variety performance was announced. And the guest list leaked. And there they were. The Spencer sisters. Not in the audience. Not in the shadows. But beside Prince William. Front and center. Smiling. Glowing. And in Harry's eyes, confirming everything he'd feared. But what made the betrayal burn even more was what happened after the red carpet. Because just when Harry thought the snub couldn't go deeper, he got a message from Lady Kitty. And it changed everything. It was 3 lines. Polite. Formal. Frosted with civility. But underneath? Icy. Final. Dear Harry, I hope this finds you well. At this time, I won't be engaging further. Kitty. That was it. No warmth. No explanation. No emotion. Just a carefully worded wall. The kind that leaves no openings and no misunderstandings. Harry stared at the message for a long time. According to a close Montecito aide, it had landed in his inbox less than 48 hours after the royal variety red carpet, and hours after Meghan had handed him the forwarded email. The one that started it all. Let's go back. Because while the Spencer family dinner at Althorpe was private, what got leaked from it would become the ticking time bomb in this story. It began with a casual follow-up, a cousin recapping their impressions from the weekend, venting a little, joking a bit too much, and eventually quoting Lady Amelia and Eliza Spencer's frustrations. What they didn't know? The recipient wasn't just a friend. They were connected to someone who once worked with Meghan. During the Archewell Foundation's early formation days, and in the media ecosystem that now surrounds the Sussexes, nothing stays buried for long. Within a week, the message reached Meghan. She didn't tell Harry immediately. She read it. Twice. Then again. Then apparently had her assistant print it out and mark the sentences she believed would enrage Harry the most. And when she handed it to him, it wasn't with comfort. It was with calculation. This is what they think of you, she reportedly said. This is what they've always thought. Let's be clear, the email wasn't dripping in venom. It wasn't dramatic or cruel, but it was honest. Brutally so. Among the quoted lines were, he's addicted to drama. Meghan uses Diana's image like a weapon, not a memory. We can't keep pretending we support the California show. Those phrases hit like darts. Especially that last one. The California show. That's what his own cousins were calling his life now. A performance. Not a choice. Not a healing journey. A show. And for Harry, who had spent the last few years fighting to reclaim his narrative, to explain why he had fled, why he had spoken out, why he had turned his grief into activism, this felt like a dagger from the inside. You expect that kind of language from the Daily Mail. Not from the girls who danced barefoot at Althorpe with you as kids. Not from the nieces of your mother, who died trying to escape that exact tabloid machine. So Harry sat with the message. And then, quietly, he decided to write back. Not to the cousin. Not to the anonymous email trail. To Kitty. Because if there was one Spencer he believed could still be reached, it was her. Lady Kitty, the eldest of the sisters. The one who walked between high society and family history with uncanny grace. The one who used to call Harry for advice during Fashion Week. The one who once told him in confidence, "You're the most like Mom." He typed the email late at night. No advisors. No PR staff. Just him, in a hoodie, barefoot in his kitchen. Meghan was upstairs. Sources say the message was heartfelt. Unscripted. It included the words confused, hurt, and sad. He asked if what he'd read was true. He said if there was frustration, he wanted to hear it from her directly, not secondhand. He ended it with, "We're still family." That has to count for something. And then came her reply. Short, chilling, devastating in its formality. At this time, I won't be engaging further. At this time? Harry read it 3 times. That phrase echoed in his head like a gavel. Not never. Not, I'm hurt too. Not give me space. Just, I'm closing this door. Now. Deliberately. Permanently. It was a masterclass in aristocratic restraint. Polite enough to avoid scandal. Cold enough to deliver a clear message. Kitty had chosen her position, and it wasn't with him. This was when Harry's demeanor changed. According to a longtime Montecito staffer, he didn't rage. He didn't break anything. He withdrew. He stopped replying to texts. He canceled a planned podcast taping. He postponed a private virtual session with military veterans that had been scheduled for weeks. He was spiraling inward. And that's when Meghan stepped in with a plan. Because here's where it gets controversial. Rather than urging him to reconcile, or wait, or cool down, she allegedly proposed a counter-narrative. They want to choose William, she reportedly told him. Then let the world see what they're choosing. Let them see the difference. And just like that, the fuse lit. What followed was a subtle but coordinated PR shift. A change in tone. Sussex insiders began quietly hinting to friendly press outlets that the Spencers had frozen out Harry long before the red carpet moment. That they had refused invitations, that they had looked down on Meghan's background, and that the divide was deeply personal, not just royal. And then came the private leak, a new quote, fed anonymously to a tabloid with close Archewell ties. Harry feels like his mother's family has abandoned her legacy. 5 words that set fire to everything. Abandoned her legacy. The phrase ignited a social media storm. Pro-Sussex fans accused the Spencer sisters of clout chasing, of classist gatekeeping, of aligning with the monarchy to protect wealth and image. But what the public didn't know yet was that the Spencer sisters had seen the leak. They knew the quote was coming, and they weren't planning to respond. Until a video emerged from the Royal Variety Performance afterparty. A video that featured muffled audio, blurry footage, and one whispered line that would set off the next explosion. But before we get there, there's one more twist. Because in the days following the leaked email and Kitty's cold reply, Harry made one final attempt to understand what went wrong. He called someone who hadn't spoken to him in over a year, Lady Amelia, and that call would change the game. 3 rings. No answer. Then a 4th. Click. Harry. Lady Amelia Spencer's voice came through clipped, cautious, laced with confusion. Not anger. Not sadness. Just guarded. And why wouldn't she be? She hadn't heard directly from Harry in over a year. Not since the fallout from the Queen's funeral. Not since the Netflix docuseries aired and made everyone in the family look either complicit or cold. Not since the whispers began that Meghan had said some of Diana's relatives were still trapped in aristocratic performance. And now, suddenly, Harry was calling? I just want to talk, he said. But Amelia wasn't ready to listen. Not the way he wanted. What followed wasn't a heart-to-heart. It was a surgical extraction of facts. Slow, clipped, uncomfortable. Harry asked about the email. She confirmed it. Said the quotes were repeated in context. Said the frustrations were real. Said that they had held back for years, and that the Althorpe dinner had finally opened the dam. Harry pressed further. Why didn't any of you tell me how you really felt? There was a pause. Then Amelia said it. We did. You just stopped listening. That one line, simple, stinging, gutted him. Because deep down, Harry believed that if he just explained himself, if he opened up enough, everyone would understand. The memoir, the interviews, the specials, they weren't attacks. They were pleas. For validation. For empathy. But to the Spencers? They were exposés. of things that should have remained private, of pain that didn't belong to him alone. Amelia didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She didn't insult Meghan, despite what many would later assume. But she did ask one question that cut Harry deeper than any tabloid headline. When was the last time you asked how we were doing? And he didn't have an answer. Because in all his battles, in all his grief, in all the press storm, the lawsuits, the interviews, Harry had centered his story, his trauma, his betrayal, his fight. But Diana wasn't just his mother. She was their aunt, their loss, their wound. And while he was grieving publicly, they were grieving silently. Amelia explained that the sisters had stayed quiet not out of indifference, but because they were trying to honor Diana the way they believed she would have wanted, with grace, discretion, and quiet strength. Not everything has to be turned into content, she said. Some memories deserve silence. It was a sentence that clashed violently with the Sussex media empire, with the memoirs, the docuseries, the audio journals, the emotional footage. And that contradiction, that collision of grief styles, was at the heart of this entire fracture. But it wasn't over. Because after Harry's call with Amelia ended, tense, unresolved, he tried one more time. He reached out to Kitty again, this time by voice message. It was unscripted, quiet, vulnerable. He reportedly said, "I miss who we were. I miss the version of this family where we didn't need permission to talk to each other. I know you're angry, but I'm still me, and I still carry Mum with me, every day. Please don't let all of this break us." No reply. For days. Until, finally, another message came through. No audio. No warmth. Just text. From Lady Kitty. And it read, "Harry, I hear your pain, but I won't allow myself to be pulled into public narratives that don't align with my values. I've chosen a different path. Please respect that." That was it. Again, no drama. No apology. Just distance. Measured and deliberate. It was, in many ways, the opposite of how Diana might have handled it. Or at least how Harry imagined she would have. But that's the haunting reality of legacy, isn't it? Each person shapes it to their own image. Each person carries a version of Diana, fractured through grief, loyalty, and time. For Harry, Diana is the icon who fled the palace, the woman who screamed into the silence and broke through with vulnerability. For Kitty, Diana is the symbol of elegance under pressure, the mother who smiled through scandal and showed poise in the face of chaos. Both believe they're honoring her, but their methods couldn't be more different. And here's where the contradictions cut deepest. Because when the Spencer sisters walked with William at the Royal Variety performance, Harry saw betrayal. But Kitty? She saw balance. She saw a family trying to present unity, to the public, to the Commonwealth, to history. In her mind, standing beside William wasn't about choosing sides. It was about calming storms. But Harry didn't see it that way. And Meghan? She saw it as war. According to sources in Montecito, Meghan was livid over Kitty's second message. Not because of the wording, but because of what it represented. The rejection wasn't just personal. It was strategic. It meant the Spencer sisters would no longer be silent. That they were now aligned with the firm. That the next time Harry and Meghan released content, they might not be able to count on the protective silence of Diana's bloodline. And then, the worst part. Meghan discovered something else. That hours after Kitty sent her message, she had attended a private dinner hosted by a major UK publisher. One that had previously printed scathing editorials about Meghan. Coincidence? Maybe. Calculated PR positioning? Probably. Either way, the optics were disastrous for the Sussexes. The Spencer sisters weren't just distancing themselves from Harry. They were embedding themselves in the establishment. And so, just as the dust was settling, a video emerged. Blurry. No context. Captured at the Royal Variety after-party. And in it, a voice. Familiar. British. Feminine. And one sentence that would ignite the next royal firestorm. It was barely a whisper, caught on a phone camera by a junior staffer. Blurry. Angled from behind a curtain. But the audio was clear enough. Just 6 words, spoken with a tight laugh and an unmistakable undertone of condescension. They always make it about them. The voice? Believed to be Lady Eliza Spencer. The they? Obvious. Meghan and Harry. And in the seconds that followed, as the video went viral on TikTok, X, and royal gossip forums, What might have remained a family fracture behind palace doors exploded across public opinion. A single, off-the-cuff remark, likely never intended for broadcast, had confirmed the suspicions of millions. The Spencer sisters weren't just neutral observers anymore. They had chosen a side, and it wasn't the Sussexes. But why now? Why, after years of strategic silence, calculated diplomacy, and carefully non-committal appearances, did the Spencer sisters suddenly stand beside William on one of the biggest stages of the royal calendar? Why the change in tone? Why the escalation? To answer that, we need to shift focus, not to Harry or Meghan or even Kitty, but to William. Because if you think the 2025 Royal Variety performance was just another elegant evening of tuxedos and symphonies, you haven't been paying attention. This wasn't just a red carpet. It was a counterstrike. According to high-level palace sources, William's invitation to the Spencer sisters was more than familial courtesy. It was a calculated maneuver, a strategic visual alliance designed to restore the image of continuity, lineage, and legacy. And most importantly, to remind the public that Diana's blood still flowed through his corner of the monarchy. Let's not forget, 2025 has been a difficult year for the House of Windsor. Health rumors, internal leaks, the constant ripple effects of Harry's tell-all interviews and Meghan's quietly aggressive media pivots. Behind palace walls, aides were scrambling. Morale was low. Approval ratings had taken a dip in younger demographics. And then came the Netflix news. The Sussexes were reportedly gearing up for another project, this time framed around rebuilding after royal betrayal. For William, the timing was existential. The crown is not just about succession, it's about narrative. And the younger generation of the royal family has always known that perception is half the battle. You can't lead a modern monarchy if the public sees you as out of touch, stiff, or cold. You need warmth. You need connection. And who better to provide that emotional bridge than the nieces of the woman still remembered as the most beloved royal in modern history? So William made the call, not just to extend an invitation, but to make a statement. That he, not Harry, was the standard-bearer of Diana's legacy. It was a brilliant move, bold, quietly ruthless, and exactly what the institution needed. Because let's be honest, while Harry's claim to Diana's spirit has always felt emotionally valid, William's claim has always been optically stronger. He is the heir, the statesman, the one who keeps calm, who plays the long game. And with Kate by his side, regal, adored, and scandal-free, he represents the future of the firm. But that future has been under siege. From Montecito podcasts, from leaked book passages, from a slow but steady erosion of the traditional royal mystique. So when William stepped onto that red carpet, flanked not just by Kate but by Lady Kitty, Eliza, and Amelia, poised, smiling, stunning, the message was undeniable. This is Diana's legacy, not in rebellion, not in exile, but here, in London, on the throne's side. Insiders say the planning for the event began months prior. It wasn't spontaneous. Every detail, from the seating arrangement at the reception to the coordinated color palette between Kate and Kitty, was carefully orchestrated. Even the photographers were tipped off. One royal press correspondent confirmed, "We were told ahead of time that there'd be a surprise visual moment." When the Spencer sisters stepped out of the car with William, it was electric. Every lens turned in their direction. But while the public was dazzled, Harry was devastated. Because he hadn't just lost his cousins. He was now watching them perform his mother's legacy with someone he barely speaks to. And the contradiction was hard to miss. William, the royal who once infamously clashed with Diana over media exposure, was now using her family to reshape his public image. To Harry, it felt hypocritical, opportunistic. To William, it was duty, survival. And to Kitty, Eliza, and Amelia, it was restoration. Because behind closed doors, the Spencer sisters had grown tired, not of Meghan per se, but of the narrative that Diana's compassion, vulnerability, and rebellion only lived on through Montecito. They resented the monopoly, the rebranding of Diana's trauma into a Netflix-friendly brand of defiance. Kitty, especially, had long believed in quiet strength. She built her career around discretion, fashion diplomacy, non-controversial charity work. She never wanted to be a royal surrogate. But when the opportunity came to subtly reclaim Diana's image from the tabloids and inject it back into the monarchy's bloodstream, she didn't say no. Some saw this as betrayal, others as course correction. But either way, it worked. In the days following the royal variety appearance, the media narrative shifted. Headlines praised the Spencer sisters for their elegant endorsement of royal stability. Analysts on BBC News speculated on what this meant for the post-Meghan image war. Even social media, notoriously divided, saw trending hashtags like hashtag Diana's legacy and hashtag Team William surge. And in Montecito, there was silence, followed by something even more dangerous. Planning. Because Harry wasn't just grieving now, he was plotting. A new project, a speech, a return to center stage. Because if William could use optics, Harry would use emotion. But before that next move could take shape, something unexpected happened. A conversation leaked between a royal aide and a member of the Spencer inner circle. And what was said would make Harry question whether this had been a media stunt or something far more personal. He stood on the balcony for over an hour. No phone, no music, just him, barefoot, staring out at the hills of Montecito. The sun was setting over the Pacific, throwing orange light across the garden that he and Meghan had curated to mimic an English estate. A mix of California lavender and wild roses, Diana's favorites, he'd once told Oprah. But that night, the calm was deceiving. Inside, he was boiling. Because what had started as a confusing public gesture, the Spencer sisters standing beside William, had now turned into something far more intimate, far more cutting. A private conversation between a mid-level Kensington Palace aide and someone described only as a trusted family friend had been leaked to the British press. Not in a formal story, but buried in the gossip columns. A whisper in an op-ed. But Harry saw it, and when he read the words, he snapped. Kitty said it's not personal, it's strategic. But that William still feels like he's cleaning up Harry's mess. The sisters agree. They think the monarchy needs visual healing, and Harry makes that impossible. It was a gut punch, a total rejection, not just of his choices, but of his existence within the family structure. He wasn't misunderstood. He wasn't the lost little boy anymore. He was the problem. That night, the mask slipped. According to a Montecito staffer, Harry's fury exploded in waves. Not screaming, not breaking things, but walking in circles through the house, repeating the same line to himself like a mantra. Cleaning up my mess. Cleaning up my mess. Cleaning up. He was stunned not just by the sentiment, but by who it came from. Lady Kitty. The cousin who used to beg him to sneak her jelly beans from Buckingham Palace gift bags. The one he once comforted after a breakup at Balmoral. The one who used to call him my rogue knight. And now, she was standing beside the brother who had barely tolerated Diana's media tactics, and calling him the mess. Meghan tried to step in, calm him, recenter him. But this time, Harry wasn't listening. Because the betrayal had crossed a new threshold. It wasn't just about family anymore. It was about memory, about narrative, about who gets to own Diana now. To Harry, his entire adult life had been a tribute to his mother's trauma. Every confession, every public revelation, every tearful interview. He saw it all as an act of healing, not just for himself, but for others who'd been silenced. But now, Diana's own family, her nieces, were standing on red carpets with the institution that had buried her pain in pearls and press briefings. And what burned most was how well it worked. The media loved it. Photos of Kitty laughing beside Kate went viral within hours. Headlines praised the Spencer-Windsor unity, as if the past decade hadn't happened. As if Meghan's tears, Harry's grief, and Diana's own pleas had all been rebranded into nostalgia merch for the next royal generation. And still, Harry kept walking. In the house, through the garden, back inside, out again, for days. But then came the second leak. And this one was even worse. Because while the first leak had framed Harry as the royal liability, the second one dug into something more primal, his manhood. According to the piece, published anonymously in a long-form weekend column, the source claimed that Harry isn't viewed as dangerous anymore, just dramatic. William sees him as a storm that's already passed. The Spencers just see weather damage now. That metaphor, weather damage, sent Harry over the edge. Because that's how they saw him now. Not a person, not a brother, not even a rebel. Just the wreckage left behind after years of self-exploration. It confirmed something he had feared for a long time, but never dared say out loud. That even if he returned to London tomorrow, even if he apologized, even if he laid down his arms, the door might not be open anymore. He might not be welcome at any table. And that, more than anything, was when the rage turned inward. According to one close friend, Harry began questioning everything. The Netflix deal, the book, the interviews, even the tone of Meghan's Archetypes podcast. He began wondering, not out loud, but in long silences, whether it had all been worth it. Because now, even the Spencers had given up on him. But here's the contradiction, the twist, the fuel that kept him from crashing. Even in that moment of despair, there was something else bubbling beneath the surface. Defiance. Because while Harry may have felt discarded, he also felt justified. He still believed that he was the only one brave enough to speak truth in a family that trafficked in lies and pageantry. He still believed that if Diana were alive, she wouldn't be smiling on that red carpet. She'd be screaming behind closed doors. He clung to that belief like a lifeboat. And Meghan? She started making calls. To producers, to advisors, to friends in the U.S. press. Because if William was going to rewrite Diana's legacy using velvet gowns and Spencer smiles, they were going to fight back with something even more powerful. Emotion. That night, Harry began writing something. Not a letter, not a book, a speech. One he planned to give at a mental health summit the following month in New York. It wasn't on the official schedule. It wasn't promoted. But it would be the most personal speech he had ever written. And its target? Not the institution. Not the crown. Not even William. It was for the family who had stood with him in childhood and left him in adulthood. But before that speech would take place, something else happened. Something that Meghan couldn't control. Something that Harry never expected. Lady Amelia called him back. And this time, she wasn't holding back. The call came at 3:14 p.m. California time. It was a quiet Thursday. Meghan was out. Archie was at a playdate. Lilibet was napping. Harry was alone in his study, laptop open, the beginnings of his speech sitting untouched on the screen. Just the words, "I was never meant to be quiet." And then his phone buzzed. +44 flashed across the screen. London. He almost didn't pick up, but something told him to. "Hello. Harry, it's Amelia." The voice was unmistakable. Still soft, still clipped with that perfect Chelsea accent. But there was something new in her tone. A firmness. A resolve. Not cruel. Not emotional. Just tired. There was no small talk. No how are you. No catching up. Amelia got straight to it. "Look, I've spoken with Kitty and Eliza. We didn't want it to come to this. But you need to hear it. Directly. No aides. No press teams. No ghost-written statements. Just us." Harry said nothing. "You're upset," she continued. "I understand that. But this isn't about taking sides. It never was. This is about exhaustion. We're tired, Harry. Tired of defending you in rooms that have grown increasingly quiet. Tired of pretending we don't flinch when a new quote drops. Tired of watching the family become a media brand." Harry's breath caught. "You think I've turned the family into a brand?" There was a pause. Then Amelia said it. "No, I think you turned your grief into a brand." Silence. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't cruel. In fact, it was her calmness that made the words cut deeper. It was the sound of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times, but had hoped she'd never have to say it. "I read the quotes," Harry said finally. "I saw the email. I got Kitty's message. I watched the red carpet. You stood with him. You all stood with him." Amelia sighed. "Because he asked. Because he reached out. Because he's not trying to make every pain public. He's not perfect, Harry. God knows we've all seen his walls. But he hasn't dragged us into war. You have." Over and over. Harry's voice dropped. "I thought we were closer than this." "We were." That answer stung more than any insult. Because it wasn't a denial. It was a eulogy. Amelia took a breath. "Do you remember when we were kids? Althorpe. That summer when Kitty broke her wrist jumping off the boathouse roof. You and Will carried her across the lawn like she was dying. And you cried harder than she did." Harry laughed bitterly. "I do. That version of you." He wasn't despair. He wasn't angry. He just felt everything. You still do. But you've let that become your compass. And it's led you into storms. Harry's hands were shaking now. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. "I've been trying to tell the truth," he muttered. "No one wanted to listen." Amelia's voice softened. "Maybe that's because you're not the only one holding it." That's when she delivered the line that would rattle him to his core. You don't own Diana's story. None of us do. She was our aunt, your mom, but she doesn't belong to just you, or to Netflix, or to a memoir. She belongs to herself, and all we have are pieces. Harry swallowed hard. Then why side with him, he asked. Why make it so public? Amelia didn't hesitate. Because public is the only language people hear now. We didn't want to fight. We wanted to reset. To show the public that family can heal. That Diana's legacy isn't just pain and rebellion. It's continuity, compassion, dignity. There was a beat of silence. Then she added, and we didn't want your silence to be the only story. That line gutted him, because she was right again. For all his efforts to speak up, to be seen, to heal out loud, Harry had become defined by absence. The seat left empty. The royal Christmas card that never featured his children. The funeral where he walked 3 paces behind his brother in stony silence. The balcony where he no longer stood. And now, the Spencers had spoken. Not with interviews, but with alignment. With proximity. With optics. With William. But Harry had one more question. One that had been eating away at him since the day the photos dropped. Did you mean what you said? About me being addicted to drama? Another long pause. Then Amelia said something that surprised him. No. A flicker of hope. But I do think, she continued, that you're addicted to purpose. And sometimes, when the pain gets too big, you turn purpose into a crusade. You turn wounds into weapons. Harry felt his chest tighten. I never meant to hurt any of you, he whispered. I know, Amelia said. But you did. There it was. The truth, unvarnished. I miss you all. We miss you too. We just don't know how to trust you anymore. And that, more than anything, was the real heartbreak. Trust. Not loyalty. Not love. But the quiet certainty that when your name is spoken in private rooms, it won't come back weaponized in a documentary or a ghostwritten passage. Before they hung up, Amelia offered one final word. Stop trying to win. Start trying to listen. That's what Mum did when no one else would. And with that, the line went dead. Harry sat in the silence. The sun had dipped below the horizon now. The light was gone. But what he didn't know yet, what none of them knew, was that the after-party video, the one that had quietly stirred the first firestorm, was about to be eclipsed by something even more viral. A public mic slip. A whispered joke. A Spencer sister caught on camera, saying something that no royal aide could spin. She slammed her phone down. Not hard enough to break it, but with enough force to make the glass-top coffee table ring out in the quiet of their Montecito living room. Meghan had just watched the video. The one circulating on Twitter, TikTok, and even British morning news programs under the hashtag #SpencerSnub. The one where Lady Kitty, or so everyone assumed, was seen leaning into Lady Eliza's ear at the Royal Variety after-party, wine flute in hand, and saying with a smirk. She was always trying too hard. It was exhausting. The clip was short. The angle was bad. There was no context. But the internet didn't care. They knew who she was. And Meghan? She knew who that smile was for. For 5 years, she had endured it. The whispers. The tight smiles. The way British aristocrats, even Diana's own family, looked at her like she was an over-eager interloper at their centuries-old club. She never said it publicly. Never complained in front of the camera. But now? The gloves were off. She was always trying too hard. That line echoed through her head like a slap. To Meghan, it was proof. Proof that no matter how graceful she tried to be, no matter how many causes she supported, no matter how much poise she brought to the balcony, they had never seen her as enough. She wasn't one of them, and she never would be. She turned to Harry, standing silently by the window, watching her. They were always jealous, she said coldly. From the beginning. Harry didn't respond. Not immediately. Because the truth was, he wasn't sure she was wrong. The Spencer sisters had always walked a fine line. Charming to Meghan's face, but reserved. Supportive in public, but absent behind the scenes. They never spoke ill of her. But they never defended her either. And now, this, caught on camera, whispering what sounded like a smug post-mortem of Meghan's place in the royal story. She was always trying too hard. But was it jealousy? Or something else? Meghan believed it was jealousy. Not because she was a duchess. Not even because she had married Diana's son. Because she had done what they never could. She'd stepped onto the world stage and taken ownership of the modern royal woman narrative. Fashion covers. UN speeches. Tom 100. Archetypes. Yes, The Spencer sisters had elegance, but Meghan had global influence. And to a class that still believed influence should come from heritage, not hustle, that kind of reach was threatening. "Do you remember," she said, walking toward Harry, "when Kitty wouldn't return my call after Archie's birth?" He nodded slowly. "And when she skipped our wedding for that fashion show in Milan?" He nodded again. "That was an accident. That wasn't scheduling. That was judgment." Her voice was rising now, not in anger, but in righteous indignation. "I spent years trying to earn their approval. I thought, maybe if I'm quiet enough, gracious enough, royal enough, they'll stop seeing me as American, as divorced, as other. But I should have known. I could have walked on water, and they'd say I was showing off." Harry listened. He knew this rage. He'd felt it himself when he'd watched his brother's face go blank at the first signs of his struggle. But now it felt heavier. Because the betrayal wasn't just institutional anymore. It was personal. From the only family who still carried Diana's blood. Meghan sat down, pulling a soft throw blanket over her lap. Her hands were shaking, not with fear, but with clarity. "They don't hate me because I failed," she said. "They hate me because I succeeded. I outshined them without even trying. And it drives them mad." Harry tilted his head, watching her. "What are you saying?" She looked him dead in the eye. "I'm saying we stop playing defense." And with that, the strategy shifted. Within hours, Archwell's media team was in motion. Not with an official statement. That would be too reactive, too obvious. But with subtle pressure. Selective outreach to sympathetic journalists. Off-record guidance about Meghan's years of being shut out by the aristocracy. Leaks about how certain royal cousins had always seen Meghan as a threat to their more traditional image. The tone was clear. This wasn't bitterness. This was the Sussexes reclaiming the narrative. But here's where it gets interesting. The backlash came fast, but not from where they expected. The British press, of course, pounced. They framed Meghan's jealousy comments, which had never actually been said on the record, as proof of a superiority complex. Royal correspondents called it another example of Meghan weaponizing victimhood. But something unexpected happened in the US. A wave of support. Influencers. Progressive media outlets. Celebrity friends. Women who had quietly watched Meghan's rise and fall over the past 5 years suddenly began pushing back. "She was always trying too hard," one viral tweet asked. "You mean trying to survive in a hostile institution while being scrutinized 24/7 for breathing too loud?" Another post showed a photo of Meghan at her first official royal engagement, arm in arm with Prince Harry, captioned, "Imagine marrying into a family that's obsessed with image and being hated for caring." By the end of the day, #they were always jealous was trending worldwide. But the Spencer camp? Silent. No retraction. No denial. No press release. Just carefully curated posts on Instagram. A charity gala here, a horse show there. Smiles. Soft filters. Nothing controversial. Because they weren't playing defense. They never were. And that, to Meghan, was the most infuriating part. "They don't even have to say anything," she told Harry that night. "All they have to do is look elegant and the press bows. But when we do anything, it's dissected to death." She wasn't wrong. But Harry, sitting across from her at the kitchen island, was quiet, brooding. Because underneath all the media warfare, the trend cycles, the clever PR, something deeper was gnawing at him. The Spencer sisters were never supposed to be enemies. They were supposed to be home. And now, they had not only turned away, they had mocked, whispered, stood beside the very system he had tried to dismantle. "They don't see me as one of them anymore," he said quietly. Meghan reached for his hand. "They never did." That sentence lingered in the air. And then came a knock on the door. It was Meghan's assistant, breathless, phone in hand. "There's another video," she said, "from the same night. And this one." She stopped. "It's about Archie." She slammed her phone down. Not hard enough to break it, but with enough force to make the glass-top coffee table ring out in the quiet of their Montecito living room. Meghan had just watched the video. The one circulating on Twitter, TikTok, and even British morning news programs under the hashtag #SpencerSnub. The one where Lady Kitty, or so everyone assumed, was seen leaning into Lady Eliza's ear at the Royal Variety after-party, wine flute in hand, and saying with a smirk, "She was always trying too hard." It was exhausting. The clip was short. The angle was bad. There was no context. But the internet didn't care. They knew who she was. And Meghan? She knew who that smile was for. For 5 years, she had endured it. The whispers, the tight smiles, the way British aristocrats, even Diana's own family, looked at her like she was an over-eager interloper at their centuries-old club. She never said it publicly, never complained in front of the camera. But now? The gloves were off. She was always trying too hard. That line echoed through her head like a slap. To Meghan, it was proof. Proof that no matter how graceful she tried to be, no matter how many causes she supported, no matter how much poise she brought to the balcony, they had never seen her as enough. She wasn't one of them, and she never would be. She turned to Harry, standing silently by the window, watching her. They were always jealous, she said coldly. From the beginning. Harry didn't respond. Not immediately. Because the truth was, he wasn't sure she was wrong. The Spencer sisters had always walked a fine line. Charming to Meghan's face, but reserved. Supportive in public, but absent behind the scenes. They never spoke ill of her. But they never defended her either. And now, this, caught on camera, whispering what sounded like a smug post-mortem of Meghan's place in the royal story. She was always trying too hard. But was it jealousy? Or something else? Meghan believed it was jealousy. Not because she was a duchess. Not even because she had married Diana's son. Because she had done what they never could. She'd stepped onto the world stage and taken ownership of the modern royal woman narrative. Fashion covers. UN speeches. Tom 100. Archetypes. Yes, the Spencer sisters had elegance. But Meghan had global influence. And to a class that still believed influence should come from heritage, not hustle, that kind of reach was threatening. "Do you remember," she said, walking toward Harry, "when Kitty wouldn't return my call after Archie's birth?" He nodded slowly. "And when she skipped our wedding for that fashion show in Milan?" He nodded again. "That was an accident. That wasn't scheduling. That was judgment." Her voice was rising now, not in anger, but in righteous indignation. "I spent years trying to earn their approval. I thought, maybe if I'm quiet enough, gracious enough, royal enough, they'll stop seeing me as American, as divorced, as other. But I should have known. I could have walked on water, and they'd say I was showing off." Harry listened. He knew this rage. He'd felt it himself.